Welcome to the third and final part of our series with Steve McDonald from the Artie Mesh Foundation. We've talked about the awakening path and about reading the world through the lens of a higher consciousness. In this conversation, we'll explore what lies ahead, the next octave of human and planetary evolution, sometimes called Ascension. Steve, can you share your vision of this next octave?
Hi, Trent. Thanks, mate. I'd be very happy to share my vision and my understanding. There's a pretty big topic set we've got for this video, and so a lot of it might be just headlines, but we'll point people to more information if they want to go deeper into it. Once again, as in the previous videos, when we look at the ascension process, we're dealing with a fractal pattern. So it's a pattern that shows up, on different scales in the same way, both in this case at both a personal level and a planetary level. So we've got our slide showing 9 layers of human development there, which comes from the research of Claire W. Graves. If you haven't looked at videos 1 and 2 yet, then it's a really good idea to have a look at those first before we dive into this, because we're just building upon what we've done previously. So we're talking about going to the next octave, and really we're going to cover 2 octaves today. And the first octave is what we call the quantum jump from first tier into second tier consciousness. And we can see that big yellow line on the slide there in between layer 6 and layer 7, and that's where the quantum jump occurs. And it's most likely that the majority of people who are on the planet at the moment are still in the first tier of consciousness. And we know we've spoken previously on the other videos about some of the early pathfinders, which came through around 1900 or so into second tier. So it's not new, but there's still not a lot of people occupying that second tier of consciousness.
Yeah, okay.
However, the gates are opening now energetically, and I've been writing in my Substack about big gateway arc waves, big waves of energy that are rolling over the planet at the moment, and the second one's due on the 10th of October this year, 2025. And these are opening the gate for access and creating the right conditions for people to make that quantum jump. So it's an exciting time to be talking about this stuff and very relevant.
Yeah, mate,
And
I can
then-
absolutely relate to that. Definitely people are becoming more conscious, mate, 110%. I've really noticed that, especially these last couple of months.
Yeah, I'm seeing it too. I'm really noticing it. And, I've been working with this model for a couple of decades now. So I've had my eye on and been waiting for, for this to show up. And here it is now. So it's a pretty exciting time. And then the second octave comes after layer 9. And it's something called the pure gem body. So we'll touch on that later on in the video. But first of all, let's have a look at this here, because this is what's most present, most current for everybody at the moment. We'll have a look at this jump into second tier. So the growth through this spiral, and it is a spiral. It might not look exactly like a spiral in a diagram, but it is a spiral that circles around and around and goes higher and higher. But it's a non-linear path, and it involves both spiraling up and spiraling down at different times. And we oscillate, which means to go backwards and forwards sometimes to build up tension, to move higher on the spiral.
Yeah.
And we also oscillate from one side of the spiral to the other between the individual themes, which are shown on the right-hand side here, and the collective themes, which are shown on the left-hand side.
I think it's very interesting, mate, when we make comments around about, we're spiraling out of control. And very much appropriate with this, that we can change that mindset, that level of consciousness, and we can kind of lose grip of things because we might be in a tier above, and then we start to spiral out of control and we fall down. We lose control because we're not on that same vibration or that same frequency that we previously were.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like, at some level, people know, even though they might sort of not be conscious. It's the fact that they know. So we're talking about the spiraling movement, the oscillation backwards and forwards, and the fact that this is non-linear, even though it's laid out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We go backwards and forwards. Sometimes we go down, sometimes we go up. And once we start approaching this quantum jump, we get into a larger oscillation as well. And we're just going to take a look at the next slide quickly, which has got the
Can you just really break down for those watching, Steve, just oscillation? What do you mean exactly by oscillation?
Yeah, so oscillation means moving backwards and forwards, and probably an obvious example would be a pendulum that swings from one side to the other side and back again. Okay, so it's a movement backwards and forwards or left and right.
Okay.
Oscillation.
Fantastic.
So this cycle of change shows the process that happens in between those layers we were just looking at. And I've been through this in detail before, but I just wanted to show it again to show how this oscillation, again, is another fractal pattern. So even at this smaller scale of moving between the layers, we go from stable into stress, and we've got this regressive search, which I've marked on this slide down the bottom left there, which takes us back to previous layers. And that's a necessary tension building process. And it's very much like pulling back the elastic band on a slingshot.
Yeah.
And then we get that slingshot effect at some point, which brings us back into, in this case, into the chaos part of the change cycle. And so that process of oscillating is, in one respect, a process of building tension, like pulling back on a slingshot and getting ready to propel yourself forward.
Like the breakthrough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What we're seeing at the quantum jump into second tier is in layer 6. So let's say that this, on this cyclic change diagram here, the stable on the left-hand side is layer 6. And we're preparing for this quantum jump. And we're going to circle back on this regressive search into layer 5, which is what happens in between all the layers. You usually go back to at least the previous layer, sometimes more. But in this particular case, in the jump between 6 and 7, we're actually going way back to layer 1.
Yeah.
And it's like we have to search back through all of the previous layers to uncover anything that's left undone or anything that's left out of tune, if we want to use the frequency metaphor of tuning ourselves. We go back and we play all the strings of all the previous layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and anything that needs to be retuned to bring it, into harmony is brought up and worked upon. And it's important to understand that this process it's not a regression. So we're not going backwards, in a sense that we're going to end up somewhere we used to be permanently. But we are searching back through those layers in order to do this work of clearing things. And those things, in a practical sense, they could be emotional issues which arose.
Yeah.
They could be, for example, survival issues that came up for us at layer 1, which we never completely resolved. And as we move through the first tier, we're able to climb up through the layers without clearing everything. So it doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to get enough momentum, enough change in our life conditions to support us, and we can grow through the layers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And sometimes we leave things behind. And this is the place, layer 6 is like the launching pad for the quantum leap, where we go back and we go through a process, and it's often not a conscious process. So we might not understand that we're circling back and oscillating, but we certainly feel it. We'll feel sometimes like we're going backwards. We might feel like we're failing. We might feel unwell.
Yeah.
All of those things that people call ascension symptoms, can come up in this process.
And would you say as well too, Steve, that I definitely could be aware of this in the last, 5 or 6 years. I think, again, COVID was a big part of this, where I felt like we all kind of stepped back as a collective consciousness, and then we've started to move forward again. But in times like this, might people find things that sort of pop up for them, which might be a bit of a tidy up from previous in their life, where it's a matter of that the environment is actually supporting them really to move into the quantum leap, because they do need to work it out. So there might be things that people feel that are out of their control, but there's probably a bigger reason behind it, which is actually for their ascension process.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Trent. COVID, the whole pandemic, interestingly enough, gave everybody some spare time in a sense. A lot of people were isolated. They didn't do the things. They didn't go to the places they would normally do. And it was almost like we were forced to sit down and take stock of life. So in that sense, even though it was a very, very unpleasant experience for many, many people, it acted like that slingshot effect, it pulled the tension, and then in effect it really energized the process of evolution for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So this can look like regression, but it's actually a process of integration where we're going backwards. We're coming across things that arise which haven't been resolved in the past. We're given the opportunity to resolve them, and we're integrating and laying that solid foundation for the quantum leap, taking us into a coherent light body activation and into the second tier of consciousness.
Yeah, it's the old regress to progress, eh?
Yeah, exactly. It's literally the old, one step backwards to take 2 forwards kind of thing.
Yep.
So let's have a look at the next slide, which we've seen in previous videos briefly. And one of the key things that is happening during this quantum leap and during that build up to the quantum leap in layer 6 is the emergence of this light body subtle energy structure. And so we go through a process of reorienting ourselves by changing the polarity of our heart and our brain. And the result of that is as in the past in layers 1 through 5, we've been dominated by our rational mind. What happens in the transition here, in the quantum leap, is that we suddenly switch to being dominated by our heart. And this luminous heart of the atonement that's marked on the diagram there becomes our central sensory and system for making sense, our sensory input and system for making sense. And we start to become heart-centered.
Yep.
And all of the rest of the geometry there, the toroidal field that forms around that luminous heart, the star tetrahedrons, the metaspinal axis, which is connecting us to the earth and to what you might call heaven, or our oversoul, to higher intelligence. At the point of the quantum leap tipping over, all of that stabilizes. And in fact, that is what causes the tipping point, is the stabilization of this geometry, tips us over into second tier. And suddenly it's like we jump up an octave. And we went through the detail of the layers in previous videos, but you might recall me saying that when people at layer 7 came up in the research behind this model, at first, Claire Graves, the researcher, didn't quite know what he was coming across here. And he found that these people had so much extra coping capacity, it was like off the charts. And in fact, he said at one point that in layer 7, a person has more coping capacity than all of the coping capacity added up through layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
So it really is off the charts. And this is the subtle energy geometry that sits behind that massive jump.
Okay.
So for many of the people watching this video today, this is the next octave. It's this jump into second tier consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But that's certainly not the end of the process.
Yeah, I can definitely say, mate, that I'm very much aware when I, have conversations with people, that I definitely find that the higher their consciousness is, then they most certainly are nowhere near as reactive as people that have got that lower consciousness. And I think it's because they're not attached to the emotion so much. And I also think it's because they're not trying to work things out in their head. They kind of feel their way through it a little bit more, and allow some of the, important things like a little bit of time to settle, to sort of sit with things. But absolutely do notice those with higher consciousness definitely react very differently to those that might be in lower consciousness, or lower consciousness at that time anyway.
Yeah, it's a really good observation, Trent. And one of the things that changes when we move into the second tier is that we lose compulsive behaviors. In the first tier, at each layer, there are certain compulsive behaviors which arise, and as the name suggests, they tend to show up in our behavior as things that we do without really being conscious of the fact that we're doing it. And that, that's linked to the observation that you just made, is that people who are in the first tier often will have some sort of compulsion, and it can get in the way of communication. And we'll notice that from time to time, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to spend any more time on this light body structure today. And I've just published a light body formation guide, which is available free on my website, and you'll get the link to that at the end of the video. So I'd encourage you to go download that PDF. And if you want to dive in deeply into the light body structure, you'll find a guide showing how it starts to form in between layer 5 and layer 6, and then what structures are typically present in each of the layers beyond that.
Mate, I just want to say that I think that's absolutely fantastic, that light body that you put together. I spent quite a little bit of time last week just diving into it for my own personal use, to be honest with you. And I really dove into it first, and, for myself, and then looked at the collective with it. Steve's such a fantastic tool, like so great, because this stuff can be complex, especially if it's new for people. Absolutely, mate. I was able to identify many points in my life where I could kind of go back and sort of identify, yeah, that makes sense. I was probably around about this octave at that time, and that makes sense why I'd done that. I actually found it as a really good tool, mate, to better understand myself, to better understand maybe some of the things that have happened in my past as well too. And I also just found it as a really good tool, Steve, that it really just gave me a perspective around a lot of things, and definitely things that were in those lower octaves where I could really identify that was just a part of my process, So there are definitely things that I hold on to, sometimes guilt, sometimes shame, bits and pieces. But through that guide, mate, it really allowed me to identify that no, this was just progression, similar to what you're talking about with the slingshot. So, mate, highly commend it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I would highly encourage everybody to get a copy and to share it as well, too, because it brings so much sense into what can feel like chaos, you know?
Thanks, Trent. I really appreciate that. And you've made some really good points there. And one of the big ones is that often when people are going through these transitions, and particularly the big jumps like this layer 6 to layer 7, it can feel like you're sick. It can feel like you've got problems that a doctor needs to fix. And the information that's in the guide can help you understand that some of these symptoms may well be a part of the transition. They're not pathologies. They're not things that you need to take a needle for or a medicine for necessarily. And just understanding that can be really reassuring.
Absolutely, mate. It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. So just as we oscillate back through the layers, when we're at 6 and we're about to make this big quantum jump, we'll go back and visit 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The same thing happens actually in the next octave. So once we get up into second tier, we're then going through a similar oscillation process, except there's only 3 layers that we need to work on here before we progress beyond layer 9 into what's called the Purian body. And I just wanted to share here that I'm actually going through this oscillation process myself at the moment around layers 8 and 7. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my experience because it might help people understand how it applies, not just where I am, but also in the first tier as well. The way it's showing up is that some days I feel like I might be in a different layer. And I just feel that from the way that I'm perceiving the world, my capacity to cope might feel different than it normally is. And also there might be physical symptoms in the body that arise as part of that process. And even just the process of being in second tier doesn't mean that you're not able to oscillate back through the first tier as well. And this is something that I wondered about for a long time, and now I'm kind of getting the answer through experience, is, even though I'm working around layer 7, layer 8 with my oscillation, I'm still going back sometimes to layer 1. I'm still occasionally noticing a feeling that comes up and I zoom in on it and I go, that's a survival issue. I've got a survival fear coming up here.
Yep.
So this is normal. It's normal for everybody to go through this process. In fact, it's more than normal. It's like a template. It's an evolutionary pattern, right? We can't escape it. We're locked into it. So everybody's going to go through this process in some way as they're moving through the layers.
Yep.
And it's okay. It's okay to feel like you've gone backwards, but just understanding that it's part of a process, it's not permanent and it will pass. And one of the other key indicators I'm finding is that when these things come up, they come up like an echo. So it doesn't feel like it's in the middle of me and driving me anymore. It feels like it's kind of separate from me and I can stand back and observe it.
Yep.
And yeah. And so that's another sign that you'll pick up in this oscillation process. It's just that slight separateness. And that's a confirmation that what you're witnessing is not the fact that you've still got this and it's driving you. It's the fact that you're in the process of releasing it and it's echoing before it disappears.
Yeah, mate, I could
Does that make
absolutely
sense?
agree with, absolutely, mate. I totally resonate. Mate, I could also say the same for myself, where I can definitely identify when I fall down into times. Some days I wake up and it's almost like I kind of fall into that and I have to move myself back up through it. I have definitely been very much this year, Steve, like very much been aware of my environment. And I can definitely tell you that for myself, I've had a couple of these moments where I felt that I've slipped down. And when I kind of look back to maybe the 24, 48 hours prior to those moments where I feel that I sort of slide down an octave, I have a bit of a reflection on where I've spent my time, who have I been around, what have I been doing, have I been on a doom scroll, what have I been eating? Like I look at all the factors in my life. I can definitely notice as well too when I'm in those higher octaves, and the same thing when I look back and I look at, well, who have I hung out with this week? Who have I spent my time with? Where am I investing my intention? And do I have purpose through everything that I'm doing? So I can definitely notice for myself that environment plays a huge part for me. And I also like to look at things that I found as a really useful tool for myself, because I've definitely identified for myself that I can fall down into those lower octaves when I guess what you might call like childhood trauma or, kind of comes into play, I guess. So one tool that I've done, Steve, that I found really well is that I kind of see myself as, big Trent now and there's little Trent. And it just allows me to kind of distinguish and separate myself. So it's like, yeah, 100% those emotions, those feelings, those things were real. Like we've all got those things from our different perceptions, but it just allows me to be witness to that a little bit more and to be able to take a bit of a step back from it and identify it. And I've just found that really useful, mate. But I definitely understand exactly what you're saying here, and I'm sure many people will.
Yeah, that's great, Trent. That's really good. And there are lots of different ways that you can go through processing this stuff. It's worthwhile remembering that sometimes the life conditions that are influencing us, they're actually not something we ate. They're not people that we hung around with. They're not something that we watched on social media. It's just a background energy that's washing over the planet. And we become sort of more aware of these things as we climb, into second tier. Now, that's not to say that it's not those things, because sometimes it is someone that you just hung out with. Sometimes it is something that you ate or something that you watched on TV or whatever. But it can also just be background energy. And I'm finding myself just like you. And just yesterday, I was thinking about, did I eat something wrong, but it wasn't that, it's just that we've got big waves breaking over the planet at the moment, big energetic waves of plasma.
Okay.
And again, I'm writing about this and giving updates in my Substack if people want to check on that kind of stuff. But there's lots of people talking about this at the moment, particularly through astrology as well.
Yep.
So there's plenty out there to consume. So let's have a look at beyond layer 9 now. So up until about a little over a year ago, all of my work was really focused around these 9 layers. And there's our next slide. Having a peek at our next slide. That's all right, mate. It would have been early last year that I stumbled on the work of Shemaya Natumi, a beautiful lady from Colorado who's been channeling material from Thoth, the Egyptian character, 55 plus years, I think. And the amount of advanced science and information relevant to the future of us and our planet that she's accumulated is just amazing. And so prior to that, I didn't really understand much about layer 9 because the research model that this is based on didn't map layer 9 at the time that he did the work. And so, I was looking at other sources, speculating about what this might be, not really knowing what was beyond it. And by coming across Shemaya's work, I've been able to understand that what's beyond layer 9 is something called the pure gem body. And the enormous amount of information that she's documented on that allowed me to then work backwards and get a deeper understanding of what layer 9 is and what layer 9 is about. And that really, it shifted the way that I understand this model that we're looking at the moment. And of course, what is happening, you got a preview on the slide there for a minute. What is happening at layer 9 is that we're going beyond the process that we understand as evolution. So this 9-layer system is all about human evolution. That's about our physical, mental, emotional bodies responding to life conditions and redesigning ourselves through the 9 layers. Mm-hmm. With new worldviews, new values, new neural networks, new command of our emotional bodies and those sorts of things. But what's happening beyond layer 9 is essentially a process of transfiguration of the physical body. And of the other aspects of the body as well, the subtle and emotional and everything else. And we're moving from a physical body made of matter that we're sitting in at the moment to a body made of life. And you can think of it as we're no longer going to be a soul occupying a body, but we become a soul expressing itself as a body of light. And now you can go to that next slide if you like, Nate.
Yeah, this one, mate.
And so here's a pretty famous quote from the Bible, from Matthew, about Yeshua, or Jesus, as most people know him, post-resurrection, where he'd been through this transfiguration process and his face shone like the sun and his clothes became as white as the light. And there are a few different references in the Bible to this process of what is called in Christianity the glorification of the body, but it's the one and the same thing as the pure gem body that we're talking about here.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm not sure if people understand that the name Jesus is a Greek translation of the writings from many, many years ago. And originally, my understanding is that in the language that was spoken of the day, Jesus' name was actually Yeshua, which can be translated to Yeshua as well. So you'll hear people calling him by those names as well. So what we're going to go through is not exactly the same, because the life conditions were quite different on the planet at the time that he went through the resurrection process, and he had an enormous amount of backup from higher intelligence, and that's a complicated story in itself. And this is a very big story. It's not my specialty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a light introduction to these topics, and I'm going to refer you to the work of Shemayana Tumid, who's really documented it in great detail, and she's the expert on this stuff.
She's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, she is great. Yeah. And so we go through a process at layer 9 of, just like we did at layer 6, of laying the foundation for this quantum jump, which is actually transfiguration in this case. And so the body needs to be fully balanced. And when you look at the old slide we were on there before of the layers, you'll notice that layer 9 is back on the central axis. It doesn't have a bias left or right. You can see that it's right on the center there, along with layer 1. And that process of oscillation backwards and forwards and retuning and clearing that we go through in the second tier between 7, 8, and 9 brings us to the point of layer 9 where we're ready to make the transfiguration, the quantum leap there. We're fully balanced in terms of our masculine, feminine, and our body is clear and as full of light as it can be, while it's still a physical body and not a pure light body.
Yep.
And then we go through a process when we're ready, and when the life conditions outside of us, the planetary life conditions, are ready to support us, then we start a process of ignition, and our body is transfigured. And I won't go through the detail because I'll probably mess it up. So go watch the videos and read the information that Shabaya has. We change from being a subtle light body structure, which we moved into fully in a coherent way in layer 7 from the diagram that I showed you. And what happens is that those geometries dissolve and the rigid scaffolding transforms into a free-form luminosity, a living continuum of light, fluid and adaptive, no longer bound by any fixed form, but retaining coherence just through resonance itself. And I'm going to give you a metaphor for understanding that. So if you can imagine that when we move into second tier, we're moving into a crystal body. It has structured geometric structure, and it's faceted and precise. When we move into the pure gem body, it's like that crystal structure is melting. So we go through this ignition process, and the structure melts and it becomes like a liquid, and we turn into like liquid light. And free-flowing, adaptive, and radiant in every direction. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
So it's just a taste there. And I want to just tell you a brief story. People that follow my work know that I've got some pretty interesting sources that I work with. And one of my trusted sources has told me recently that a very small number of humans on the planet at the moment have stepped into the pure Chem body transfiguration process. And that happened last year.
Okay.
And we're talking about a very, very small number here. It's extremely rare. But what this information tells us is that this is not just some future thing. It's not a fantasy. It's actually a reality. And it's already unfolding on the planet. The conditions are arriving. The pathway is open for this to happen. So for those people whose mission, whose role here on the planet is to be pathfinders in that process, the gate is open for them as well. And for the rest of us, our job is to prepare our own body, our own coherence, so that when the timing is right for us, that our body and soul can make that great leap beyond layer 9 into the transfiguration in the pure gem body as well.
Yep. Makes sense.
And just as with every other transformation that we've spoken about through this 9-layer model that precedes it, the transfiguration of these people who are already starting to move into that pure gem body, it wasn't a straight line. So it happened through oscillation, through circling back and moving forward until the whole energetic lattice was ready to ignite. It's the same rhythm that you, Trent, and me and everybody watching is going through at the moment, wherever they are on the spiral, they're going through that change process in the same pattern, just at slightly different frequencies.
Yeah. Okay.
How does all that sound, mate?
It sounds spot on. I can make complete sense of that. I think that you explain it quite well. And I think just for those watching as well too, when Steve talks of, and the same as Shemai when she speaks of Thoth, around that higher intelligence and sort of channeling is effectively, drawing from higher levels of consciousness and pulling that down in a form that, receives pieces of information that is here to assist and help others in their ascension progress as they go through this journey.
And a really significant part of that process is just living it yourself. And as you're going through these processes, it's good to understand where you are on the map and to use these models like we're showing you now. But the bottom line is, what are you experiencing?
Yeah.
And, and if you find that your experience correlates with what we're talking about here, then, that's some level of confirmation for you that the sources that this is coming from are genuine.
Yeah, I think your guide again, Steve, gives a great explanation on that. That's one thing that I hear quite often now in regards when people come and ask me, Trent, I keep on getting like this ringing in my right ear. I don't understand why I'm getting it. What is it? So I think those things that you've got, Steve, in that light body guide is just a great tool to always go back to. I've definitely found great value in that in a very short space of time, just to help understand, because things they just start to happen,
They do indeed, mate. Absolutely. All right. So we've worked our way through those two octaves now. We've looked at the first jump up an octave, which takes us into second tier, and then the next one following that, into the pure gem body. And these things are not strictly technically octaves, in terms of the frequencies or anything like that. We're just using that as a metaphor to help us understand, from a frequency-based metaphor, that this is all about frequency. It's all about raising our frequency and retuning ourselves in order to settle and become stable at new frequencies. All right. Well, we might we'll skip through to the slide about the solar system and space now, mate.
Yeah.
That's
Now
the one.
it's really interesting.
So we'll have a look in the time that we've got left. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a look in the time that we've got left at the planetary situation. And just as individuals activate their light bodies and their pure gem bodies, there's also a collective effect. And I spoke about this briefly in the last video, where once a certain number of people activate their light body on Earth, then that's creating a form of stability, of coherence, energetically on the planet. And it's also docking with the planet's own light body and its own system of energetic nodes. So this process that we're going through, it's not just a process for humans, it's also a process for the planet herself and everything on the planet. And as we develop, we tap into and in those higher levels of second tier, layer 8, layer 9, we are already starting to energetically dock and become energetic nodes within the planet's lattice or network structure.
Yeah, the web.
Yeah. And as we achieve that process, we're not losing our sovereignty at all. So we're still absolutely sovereign beings, and each light body retains its own distinct frequency. Yet together they form a unified resonance with the planet. And it's a bit like many voices singing in harmony. And they're all singing. Yeah, exactly. And they're all singing the same song. So our planet is a conscious being, although that's just not really widespread belief at the moment. Not yet, but we'll get there. And Earth is developing her own light body, and the name of that light body is the Archimar grid. That's the name that is used particularly in the Thothic teachings.
Yeah. The Archimar grid, did you say, Steve? The Archimar?
Archimar.
Okay, Archimar. Yep.
Archimar grid. Yeah. And so just as humans are starting to develop their light bodies, the same thing is going on at a planetary level. It's all synchronized. Yep. And it all comes back to life conditions. In the same way that our personal life conditions impact our development, then the planetary life conditions impact the planet's development. And that's why we're going to have a look at what's going on at a solar system level at the moment, so we can understand the planetary life conditions. So even before I discovered Shemai's work, I was looking into this myself for some years, because I understood the whole principle of life conditions and their effect at a solar system level.
Yeah, as above, so below.
Yeah, exactly. And I learned that our solar system has been flying through a cloud, like a cloud of gas and plasma called the local interstellar cloud. And on this slide, it's just abbreviated to LIC. You can see it near the sun there. And we've been traveling through that cloud apparently for thousands and thousands of years. And one of the characteristics of the life conditions in the local interstellar cloud has been that the cloud blocks certain frequencies of light. So we've been experiencing what's called in the Thothic work through Shemaiah an orotronic reality where we don't get exposed to the full frequency of divine light. And that is also closely tied in with the fact that we had fell into greater density and the ambient frequency on our planet plummeted, as we went into that density. And there's vague memory of life before that, which is maintained in some of our indigenous traditions.
Yeah.
And amongst the Australian Aboriginals here, they talk about the dream time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are memories that come through sometimes of, astrophysical events like supernovas and those sorts of things that are being remembered. And one of them was documented and it happened 30,000 years ago. And yet there were still people here in Australia in a particular mob talking about this event as part of their oral history. So, things like that are a great indicator that when we hear people talking about the dream time, actually there's a reality underlying that memory. It's not literally a dream. It's actually a time when life was much, much different on the planet. It was like a dream compared to what we're in now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's happening at the moment is that our solar system is exiting the local interstellar cloud, and we're transiting towards something called the G cloud, which you can see labeled there. And the G cloud has a completely different set of life conditions, which are actually beneficial to our evolution and the evolution of our planet. And so we're in a very, very interesting place at the moment. Mainstream science, based on my research, is questioning whether we've left the interstellar cloud or not. And of course, it's something difficult to measure because, with the instruments that we have, we've only got a couple of probes that have gone out far enough to maybe get a sense of where our solar system is at. But the things that are showing up now, like these gateway arc wave, plasma waves that are coming through, the symptoms that are being experienced, the physical lived experience of people activating light bodies and pure gem bodies is telling us that we have exiting and then probably left the sheltered nature of that local interstellar cloud, and we're being exposed to high frequency light now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we're moving towards the G cloud, and we actually in something at the moment which is called the Pyramidus radius matrix, and that is, you could call it a preparation zone for planetary ascension. And through interdimensional sources, it's been confirmed that we're in the Pyramidus radius matrix now, which is part of the changing life conditions that we're all experiencing, and part of what's driving, our acceleration at the moment as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And where's this all taking us? Well, according to the Thothic stream through Shemaiah, we're headed towards what's known as the 44th Stargate, which is an interdimensional access point that is going to allow our whole planet to ascend. And when I say our whole planet, I don't mean literally everything. And again, I'm just going to brush on this because it's not my expertise. But as the planet ascends, there are certain zones on the planet that will be centers for high frequency and gathering places for people going through the ascension process. In the same way that throughout history, as far as we can remember, when people died, they shed their body and then their soul ascends. That's the process for humans. In this case, there will be a shedding, of some of the earthly matter while, parts of the planet will ascend. But if you want to understand and get the down low on all that sort of stuff, go check out Shemaiah's material. She's got heaps and heaps of videos on the dynamics of planetary ascension. But the key points to take away out here are that our ascension process is taking us through to another dimension. And this is something that it took me years to kind of come around to this idea. Started to get glimpses of it many, many years ago, that it seemed like our evolution was actually taking us into another dimension. And I've slowly come to believe that is the case. And if you think about it, when we come into incarnation on this planet, we come from another dimension.
Absolutely.
And when we die, we go back to another dimension. So why would it be so unusual that we're evolving into another dimension as well?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always
So
think too, mate, I always call like the solar system the soul system, which is really what I think it's actually meant to be. And absolutely can definitely relate, mate. I find it really interesting if people can't understand that, yeah, we do go to another dimension, obviously, when we pass. And then obviously we come back in that reincarnation cycle, we come back to learn those lessons. And I've sort of had the feelings, I guess, Steve, more than anything, the belief of it that I definitely feel everything that you're talking about, like not just logically think it, but I definitely, absolutely, definitely feel it. And to me, I guess, this really is what that great awakening is, right? And it's around about moving with that ascension. Will there be a piece, or could there be a piece where I understand that it's kind of like a bit of a numbers thing, right? The more activated beings that are on the planet can actually evolve with the Earth, but would it be possible that there could be two split dimensions from that as well too? So some that may not evolve with the Earth and an old Earth stays, and then would a new Earth form, or would it just be a matter of going to another dimension? But can there be a split if I talk about the current mass of the beings on this planet at the moment? Could there be some that evolve and some that don't evolve?
the short answer is yes, there are two pathways. From what I understand, through Shemaiah's material, is that when Earth ascends through the Stargate, what's left behind won't be habitable. So for those souls on the planet, and again, through her work, I understand that the majority of people on the planet at the moment will ascend with Earth. But those who at a soul level are not ready for that process will exit their bodies and reincarnate on another planet similar to Earth in order to continue their evolutionary path under similar conditions.
Yeah. Cool. Makes sense.
And that version fits exactly with guidance that my colleague Julia here at RDMS Foundation has received through her channels. And over the past couple of years, she's been leading a meditation group whose job is to help guide those people who need to leave this solar system and incarnate in another solar system. And they've been doing that work for a few years now, and particularly guiding souls through the star Antares in
Yeah.
the constellation Scorpius. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. There is another pathway for those souls who are not ready for this process, but for everybody else and for the soul of the planet herself, the journey will take us through this Stargate. Answer a question that probably a lot of people are thinking at the moment about this light principle 40 flash label on the slide. So as part of this process of moving into the full light spectrum, we will be exposed to that full light spectrum in a trigger event that will start the ascension through the Stargate. And again, this is Shemaiah's work, so I recommend you go and get the full information from her. But my understanding is that the light principle 40 flash will be a beneficial flash of light sufficient to trigger the ascension process at a planetary level. Yeah. And in terms of timeline, there's no set timeline for this. It's probably more a matter of decades away than years away. And yeah, there's not much more I can say
Yeah.
other than that. I do just want to point out that at the moment there's a lot of fearful material going around on the web about a solar flash being a catastrophic event, and based on all the material that I have access to, I can say that that's not the case. And any flashes of light that do come through the sun are going to be beneficial in aid of our ascension process.
Yeah. Mate, want to ask you on this one, I think that we've sort of spoke a little bit and used Jesus as a bit of a reference and trying to understand the deeper meaning to Jesus as well too in the light body activation. So
Yeah.
would this be something that people might relate to potentially, in Christianity as the example is around about that rapture? And it's sort of like the heavens open up and, people, is that a bit of a reference from your point of view and from your perspective, which is a bit of a reference of obviously the light body activating, people moving to higher levels of consciousness? There's similarities in that story in regards to what we're discussing at the moment?
I do. I believe that all of this, the biblical stories and all of the other prophecies that come from other cultures and other sources are referring to this ascension process.
Yeah, I would agree.
So what that means is that we literally are in the end times, as described in the Bible. However, we weren't given the full story. We were given a lot of metaphor stories that we were ascending to heaven and those sorts of things. But we got to remember that this material, came through thousands of years ago, and it came through to an Earth that was operating at a different value systems, not able to grasp the complexity of the situation in the way that we can now. So the answer from my point of view is yes, it is. That's what that's referring to. And when you go through Shemaya's material and you learn about the advanced science behind this dimensional shift, it talks about as we go into this shifting process around the light principle 40 flash, people who have passed away and have been in heaven as we understand it will become visible to us, and we'll be able to interact with them again, and that fits with some of the biblical predictions as well in different teachings where, the dead will be raised again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll all ascend together. But the science is there in Shemaya's material now.
Mate, I absolutely agree. And, even again, just using Jesus as his reference point to help people understand. But, quite often it's to speak of Christ comes again and, Christ comes in the body. And I think we're probably aligned in this, Steve, that Christ coming again is really the ascension or the consciousness process of each individual. And the body is the collective consciousness of all of us. So the story really, from my perspective, of Jesus coming again in Christianity is really around about the consciousness in each individual and the light bodies, which then activate onto the planet, which then allow the possibility for us to then be able to move as one into whatever's next for us on that, on our experience, our soul experience.
Yeah, I believe that, mate. And I believe that what Yeshua, Jesus, came here to do was opening a gateway for us and opening a pathway. If you read the Bible, you'll read many phrases that reflect that. Like I am the way.
Yeah, it's very clear.
He came to show the way and to show us that there's something beyond death, or what we understand as death.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the whole planet is going to experience in this process of ascension that we're talking about right now. Yeah.
I think it's also just, I'll just quickly throw in there for those watching, but there's a lot of little hidden messages, I guess, in there when we talk around about Jesus. I'll just jump on Jesus here for a moment and we think of it as that physical story. When we talk around about, Jesus and the 33 vertebrae in the spine being 33 years of age, which is really the progression and the activation of that light body coming to life as well too. So I think there's a lot of references that really, when you look at it, the Bible esoteric point of view, which is looking at it more on a soul and a spirit and a consciousness level, it absolutely aligns with what Steve is talking about right now. It's bread and butter, absolutely aligns.
It does. Yeah, I agree, mate. Absolutely. So that's an overview of what's going on at solar system level and planetary level. We're moving through this pyramidus radius matrix already. We're in the preparation time and we're headed towards an interdimensional shift. So there she is. As I mentioned in a previous video, Julia and I went to visit her earlier in the year, which is fantastic, in Crestone, Colorado. And the amount of work that she's put in over the years documenting this stuff it just blows me away. New Earth Arc Foundation is a foundation that she's set up to carry this work forward. And she's got a website called newearthstar.org. That's her main website. You can see the URL there. And also she operates something called the New Earth Star Inner Academy, which is for teaching her material and also supporting other teachers and collaborating as well. And we're at Artemis Foundation, we're actively collaborating with Shemaya. I interviewed her in a podcast last year. It's episode 145 in my podcast called Future Sense, which you'll find on Apple Podcasts and all the big podcast platforms.
Yeah, mate, I'll put the link in here for a post email for anybody watching so they can find it.
Yeah, and that's a great place to start, actually. It's just to hear her voice, hear her story, how she came to be doing what she's doing, and how she went through what all of us go through, big aha moments of realizing that, oh my God, this is real.
Yep.
And some of her interaction, with interesting people like Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut from NASA. Yeah, it's a good listen, I think.
I mean, you only just have to look at her on a physical sense, and you can just see how light she is within that self. You look how
Yeah.
crystal clear those eyes are. Obviously, the light literally shining from the inside out. I've never had the pleasure to meet her like you have, Steve, but I absolutely love her material. People might be familiar. Some people like Bashar and things like that are a little bit similar in this space, but I would highly recommend to go and check out her work. And I'll put that link into the podcast that Steve did do. Check it out. And just be gentle with yourself as you walk through it, because it very much is that this is real.
Absolutely, it is. And some of my friends that I've shown some of Shemaiah's videos, sometimes they can't sit through them because there's so much energy, coming through the screen and so much information that they've got to like pause it and go for a walk, let it sink in. So yeah, it's definitely something to be gentle with yourself about, for sure.
Patience and gentle.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you're watching this, then there's a chance that you may be someone who's here on this planet to be one of the pathfinders for this process. And it's also possible that you might have starseed connections. In other words, lives that you've lived in other worlds, and that you've come in here with that experience, to be here at this time to teach and support other people as we go through this massive process that we've just talked about. And so just bear that in mind. And there are a bunch of resources out there. I guess we can run through all those now, Trent, including the Light Body Guide that I put together, which is free online, our Substack, RDMesh Substack, which you can see the address there. And also, futuresense.it is my podcast website. And through RDMesh Foundation, we're providing support to individuals through mentoring, through one-on-one healing sessions. And my colleague Julie has just launched something called the 44-Day Spiral Path, which is a 44-day program that will take you through a process of supporting the activation of early stage light body. And we're talking about that, a quantum jump from 6 to 7 in that case.
Yeah.
And we're doing stuff together as well, mate, aren't we?
We're going to be doing plenty, mate. We're going to do plenty. I want to just add to what Steve said there, because I think it's really important. It's really appropriate at the time being. But, I'll speak from my own personal experience, and this may be something that you may be feeling as well too, or something that you may have felt. But if you've ever had that feeling like that you're here for something big, and and you may have felt this your whole life, like you've got a purpose, you're here for something big, you haven't been exactly sure what it is. People may have viewed you in your life as potentially having mental health challenges, or you're off the chart, or you're a little bit woo-woo, or you're a hippie, or whatever it might be. They're definitely walks that I've gone through in my life where I've always had this big sense of knowing that I'm here for something, but I've also known that the time wasn't right. I just known that it's not my time right now. It's not my 15 minutes right now, but I just always sensed something was coming. For myself, in regards to awakening work, it's where I feel at home again. Definitely, even as I listen to Steve talk to now, I would learn just as much as what you guys watching at the moment would learn from Steve. But there's some sense of knowing as Steve talks. It's like I feel it, I've felt it, I understand it. I don't really have a logical explanation for it, but I really feel it within here. And you might be somebody, like myself, like Steve, that may feel those things. And I think it's just really important to highlight that, there is a time for everything. There is a season for everything. And my belief, and what I believe that I am here for, the same as Steve, is that, I believe that I'm here to help people through this process in the awakening, which is the reason why me and Steve do work so closely together, and why we'll be continuing to work closely together. Because I think there's a lot of us, especially in this IM audience, I think there's a lot of us that may have felt that not exactly sure what I'm here for. We know this mundane stuff doesn't suit us. We chase money. We don't chase titles. We live on compassion, care, kindness. We want to be a part of something. We do it in humility. We don't do it with ego. So if you're feeling some of those things, then just know that, you're not alone. And I tell myself every morning in the mirror, like, my time is now. It's my time to step up. And it can be uncomfortable to enter this space. I'll be the first person to put my hand up when you come into this space, because you don't want to be seen as the guru, and some of those things in those lower octaves, start to pop up. But the reality of it is that we all have a purpose and we all have a mission. And if some of the things that Steve has spoken about, then I would encourage you to go to Steve. Steve is available, obviously, through the RD Mesh Foundation. Steve's also available now through I Am Awakening too. So if you would like to connect to better understand and maybe see where you might fit in this role, I can't give you all the answers by any means, but I can let you know that you're not alone if you feel those things. And if you, as I talk right now, if you can really sense that flame within, then I'd probably say that's a pretty good indicator. So please do check out Steve's stuff at Artie Mesh Foundation. Please do check it out. See what's happening in there. Shimei as well too. Feel comfortable with it, and just know that myself and Steve, we don't think anyone's crazy, because we're aware people probably think that we're crazy, right? So we understand it. So just be aware there is no judgment, because at the end of the day, like I tell people, no one's got the answers, right? Until anyone can tell me how I got here and where I'm going, nothing's off the charts. But when we talk around about the stuff like we have in these last 3 sessions, there's just some sense of knowing. Like I just know I'm in the right place at the right time. So open invitation to please reach out if you have any of these feelings, to myself and obviously to Steve as well too.
Well said, mate. And I've got a couple of closing words here, which I might just read through if you excuse me.
Please.
So big takeaways. The next octave is not somewhere distant in the future. It's already opening, and we're talking about that jump to second tier, of course. Each of us carries the light body as a seed of the new humanity. So there's nothing that you need to do in order to seed your light body. It's automatic. As we awaken it, we not only transform ourselves, we contribute to the planetary shift as well. And this is the essence of Ascension, the personal and the planetary rising together into a new harmony. And together we become the symphony.
It's time to work as a sympathy, right? Instead of being the solo artist.
Exactly, mate. Exactly.
So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to Steve for his wealth of knowledge, for his time, for his care within this space. So thank you very much, my brother. It's been an absolute pleasure to do this. I'll always love working with yourself, mate, because I'm a student as much as anything in that path. And I love the way that you share your gifts and those gifts of wisdom. And I think it's also just quite inspiring for all of us. I definitely get inspiration from Steve. And I think it's it's the time now where we need to share our gifts, and we need to, give back to each other, to grow as one. So as Steve said, keep your eyes out. We do have a bunch of retreats, which will be small retreats in our backyard here in Byron Bay, and there'll always be our annual retreat as well too at Thailand. So without anything further, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for many more masterclasses, and you will see myself and Steve again very soon. Thanks, Steve, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.